Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our podcast series. This is Mud, Blood, and Mother's Milk. It is our project at St. Mary's University for students to share their research on the history of slavery in San Antonio and Texas. And today we have Alexis Zepeda, who is a senior political science major. She's on her way to law school. She will be in criminal defense. And I've just really enjoyed your many contributions in class this semester, Alexis, and also the insights you bring from the field of um, of law and criminal justice. So this has been a great contribution, and I'm excited for you to share your work with our audience. So take it away whenever you're ready.
Yes, so hello
Oh,
everybody. My
I did
name
forget. I did forget one thing. Alexis is also an artist, and she specializes in needle art, and we have that in common. I love to crochet also. So yeah, she's not just a brilliant woman; she's also an artist. So yeah, thank you, Alexis.
so hello everyone. So today I had the wonderful opportunity of being able to tell Mexico's pro-abolitionist story um, between the years of 1821 and 1836. So I hope the presentation and what I have for you today is just as exciting as for you as it was for me. Um, and yeah, we can go ahead and get started with that. Um, okay. Oh, share screen, Chrome tab. Here we go. So, what we are doing here, so this is, I wanted to kind of capture the border dispute that kind of went on between the United States and what was Mexico at the time. So that's kind of the purpose for this title here. So el Rasgon Entre Dos Mundos basically translates to the tear between two worlds. And I feel like the issue of slavery was kind of that tear between uh, the life you would have in Mexico and the life that you would have in the United States. So that's the whole purpose for this particular title here.
Well,
So what was that?
well chosen. I like that.
Thank you. So some of our initial finding, or my initial findings here, is that there is the Lincoln misconception, which we'll get into shortly, and then we also have that abolitionist sentiments were very costly for Mexico in multiple kinds of ways. Um, and then for three, there are the economic benefits of slavery were often a large justification as to why slavery existed for so long and why it began in the first place. But in my research here, I've kind of dug up that there's been alternative economic endeavors that happened in Mexico, and I mean there was no need for slavery for Mexico to have a good economy. So I feel like that was super important to this body of research. And four, that Mexico was a safe haven for freedom seekers. As we all know, the United States did not abolish slavery whatsoever in this time period, and it was actually running very rampant. And as you'll see, as we kind of get through this PowerPoint and through all of the research, um, that it was actually ramping up at this time. So we'll go ahead and so, why is this important? So, as I mentioned, there is a huge misconception about Abraham Lincoln being the first um, kind of well known person to express abolitionist sentiments. Um, and it's what we are taught in many schools. That's what I thought for such a very long time um, until I kind of got to college, and especially in doing this body of research, I realized that's very much not the case. Um, so yeah, and then as mentioned, there's an overused justification of slavery for its economic benefits, and I'm here today to just let you guys know that that's not the entirety of the truth. I also thought that this body of research could explain the instability of Mexico and how it kind of solidified the instability in Mexico, kind of solidified Mexico's place as a peripheral state in like the international world. I thought that that could be an interesting way to use this research, and as we'll see, a lot of the fight for abolitionism contributed to lots of instability in the country. And then number four, the belief that Mexico exploited sensitivity of anti-slavery sentiments within like the general discourse of this overall topic. Um, it's very common to amongst, I guess, historians. Um, they believe that Mexico kind of took the opportunistic route of wanting to abolish slavery for the purpose of getting, I guess you can say, soft power from other countries in the globe, such as I think Britain
Mhm.
specifically was a main player in that. Um, and they believed that Mexico were if oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so we'll edit this part out and I'll just re-explain number four.
Yeah, re-explain it, Ika.
Okay. So, and then number four, the belief that Mexico exploited the sensitivity of anti slavery sentiments. Among the general discourse surrounding the topic, a lot of people believe that Mexico acted very opportunistically uh, in their choice to kind of give their sentiments that slavery is not okay and that it shouldn't exist. Um, Many people believe that that was exploited to gain international of things like international funding, trade relations, things of that nature. So I think that this body of research can kind of prove that this was a genuine humanitarian act on the behalf of Mexico.
Nice.
So, for our background, I think it's important to understand where Mexico was in 1821. So, we're just coming off the independence war from Spain, which war is very expensive to any country, and especially to a newly independent one. Um, yeah, so in that, you're kind of vulnerable in the sense that you don't really have an economy, you don't really know how you're going to run the country yet. Um, you just know at least you're free, and that's kind of the position of Mexico was in the year 1821. Um, and even in that, there's vulnerabilities after colonization. There's vulnerabilities of being colonized by another country, and again, just overall not knowing where the country's going to go yet, just kind of knowing that you're here, you're free from Spanish rule, and you kind of have to build from the ground up. So it's an interesting journey forward because there's no precedent on how to run, really.
That's nice.
So this is the abolitionist documentation we're going to go through. So first we have the Iguala Plan, which is from 1821. We have the Constitution of 1827, the Guerrero Decree of 1829, the national ban on immigration into Mexico. So this is also named the Law of April 6, 1830, and Felix Hayward's testimony. So my personal favorite about this interaction and this documentation is the Akampatan hug. I think I had never known about this before, but um, I think it's such a sweet story. So here we have Augustin de Intervide, and we have Vicente Guerrero. So about Iturbide kind of was a caudillo at the time, which were more men you look to. They're strong men. They are men who fight in the militias and things like that. His mother, I believe, was Mexican, and his father was from Spain. And then here with Vicente Guerrero, he is, I believe, half African American or half African and half Indian as well, with, of course, some Mexican heritage. So it becomes a pretty interesting dynamic between these two because these two are the initial revolutionaries that are responsible for the Mexican independence from Spain. And I think what's super interesting about them is initially, there was more. There was a kind of dichotomy within the revolutionary movement. I believe it was Iturbide that kind of took a more conservative stance um, on the revolution, and so that did bring conflict between the two. But at the so and then the Akampatan hug basically refers to a small little battle, I guess you could say. It was very small between both sides of this revolution. And it is here where they kind of come to this agreement that, revolutions only work if we do it together. And I think if I can show this properly, this is actually them hugging. And there's two sides, there are these troops here on either side. And this kind of symbolizes their joint efforts together. And oh, actually, can you see the picture that I'm showing? I don't think so.
I can see only the Iguala plan. I can't see the
Oh,
Akapitan.
oh my goodness. Okay.
That's okay.
So forget what I just said.
All
We'll
right, no
show.
problem. Well, oh, there it is.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay,
So
there it is.
this is the Akampatan hug. So this is again, like I said, this is where a small, very, very small battle, if you could even call it that, was kind of fought here between the two sides of the revolution. And towards the end, they kind of just make up and say that, this revolution can only be effective if it's one voice, one unified voice against Spain. So this is quite literally a photo of them hugging with either of their troops on each side here, kind of symbolizing that the revolution will take off but with both of them together.
Nice.
So in that, they end up creating the Iguala Plan. So the Iguala Plan is essentially the equivalence of like a Declaration of
Manifesto.
Independence almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's within Article 12 actually that I can go ahead and show you. So this is the Iguala Plan. As we can see, we've got Augustin de Iturbide, and we also have the date, so February 24th of 1821, sorry. And it is in Article 12 here where he basically is explaining that in Nueva España, which would refers to Mexico, um, all of its inhabitants, regardless of European, African, Indian, whatever, they are all to be treated the same, and no
They're all
one.
citizens. Yeah. All
Right.
citizens. Yeah.
They're all citizens of Nueva España. Not a lot of people consider this to be abolitionist. I do
I do.
for the reasoning that, um, as we know, in Mexico there was already the caste system, um, in which kind of ranked different kinds of citizens depending on their heritage. So naturally, we have pure Spanish, those who are born in Spain, at the top of this caste system, and African slaves at the very bottom. And so so the Iguala Plan kind of diminishes that and diminishes the idea of the caste system, which I feel is abolitionist in nature.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm
I believe
okay.
that that's a fair statement
We
to make.
certainly did not accord citizenship in the U.S. Constitution or the Declaration of Independence to any Indians, any indigenous peoples, nor to any African American people. So yeah, this is a huge step forward. Excellent.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we have the Constitution of 1827. So at the time, there, so Mexico ended
I
up
interrupt
being
you. I'm gonna pause 1 second real quick.
uh
Yeah.
Okay. So after the Iguala Plan, a lot of, also within this discourse around this topic, a lot of people, historians, academics, how would I say that?
Yeah.
Academics?
Academic. Yeah.
Oh, academics do refer to the Constitution of 1824 as an abolitionist document. Um, however, going through the actual document, there is no blatant um, affirmation of any kind of equality or anything about slaves in general. There's no kind of affirmation within any of the articles. But there is, however, that kind of affirmation in the Constitution of 1827. So the Constitution of 1827, as you can see here, is the state. So the law of decrees of the state of Coahuila in Texas. So this one is also translated to English for any those who don't cannot read Spanish. So this is also the colonization law of Tamaulipas, naturalization. So this kind of deals with the oh my goodness, this document kind of deals with those kind of things that are going on in the country at the moment. And then it is actually Article 10 here. Right. Did I just read that wrong? Oh my goodness, it's Article 13. Okay.
Okay, no, you had it right. You had it right. Article 13. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes. So in Article 13
Want to
here,
make it a little bigger for us so we can read it with you?
yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Yes. So in Article 13 here, we can read from and after the promulgation of the Constitution in the capital of each district. No one shall be born a slave in this state, and after 6 months, the introduction of slaves under any pretext shall not be permitted. So that this was essentially to combat the amount of Anglo-Americans bringing in their own slaves at the time. So as we all can remember, the country's very new. We kind of need a way to boost the economy to get the country kind of going, and inviting people to live in your country is the best way to do that. So at the time, we start seeing the rise of empresarios, which are essentially businessmen who sell the land of Mexico to Anglo-Americans who will then eventually migrate into the country. But with the migration of Anglo-Americans, they also want to bring their enslaved people along with them, um, which kind of is what starts the trickiness and all the intricacies of this kind of tension between the Mexican government and Anglo-Americans who migrate into the country. So this constitution here is
This is
kind
the
of
state
the first
constitution.
warning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the state when Coahuila and Texas was being formed, they're promulgating this state constitution. Excellent.
right. And then, so we also have the Guerrero Decree of 1929. And
1829.
oh my goodness,
Okay,
1829.
1829. That's okay.
1829, yes. So right here, this is when Guerrero assumed presidency, and in the first, I don't think, oh, and here, so this is the document. I cannot seem to get it any
That's
bigger.
okay. Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
go.
You can see it right here, Article 1. So article right here, number 1, basically means that abolition, so slavery. So this literally translates to abolition of slavery,
Yeah.
of slavery in the
Slavery
Republic.
is abolished. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this basically, uh-oh, this basically outlaws slavery within Mexico,
Excellent.
which
Can you
does
show
not.
everybody the date? Can you show everybody the actual date that that's being
Oh,
promulgated at the bottom of that? I think I saw it right at the bottom of the decree
right.
there.
So here we have in Mexico, 15th of September in 1829.
Okay, excellent. So it was Independence Day. This was a
Right.
day decree. That's a celebration of independence. By decreeing it, everybody is free. Everybody's independent. That's a beautiful gesture. Thank you.
And he even references that it's the anniversary of independence. So I
Mhm.
believe that this was very much intentional
Yeah,
on
excellent.
his part. Yes. So then we also have the law of April 6th, 1823, or 1830, my apologies.
No problem.
So this is essentially an immigration ban for Anglo-Americans, and as well as more restrictions on kind of goods that are coming into the country, um, because they had dealt with a lot of issues with Anglo-Americans smuggling things, like tobacco and things of that nature, as well as enslaved people. Um, but there's also a more serious thing with the border, with other countries kind of trying to smuggle things in. So this is kind of saying that, you know, as long as Anglo-Americans are coming into this country, um, we don't, Mexico did not appreciate these things that were happening behind their back, essentially. So the law of April 6th, 1830, kind of prohibits that entirely, and no longer allows for Anglo-Americans as well as their enslaved people to come to the country. And it's right here in Article 10. So I did find this a particular version of it, but that's quite hard to see and zoom into. So I also found this kind of, so this basically
What?
lists out the articles that are more easier to see.
Good.
And then here in Article 10, we can see that no change shall be made with respect to the slaves now in the states, but the federal government and the government of each state shall most strictly enforce the colonization laws and prevent the further introduction of slaves. Um, so, in nature, this can be considered abolitionist, as as the Constitution of 1827 just came out, that basically um, kind of wanted to start transitioning slaves from enslaved people of this lifelong and generational long institution of slavery that they had been going through. And I think that Article 10 reaffirms that idea, um, as in turn the government acknowledges that in enforcing the colonization laws, this would prevent the further introduction of slaves, and as well as the overall institution as a whole. So once you stop introducing slaves into your country, enslaved people into your country, my apologies, um,
Mm-hmm.
you're slowly trying to counteract the continuation of slavery as a whole. And so that's what I had taken from this particular document.
Excellent.
And then we also have Felix Haywood. So, Felix Haywood is a former enslaved person who was born in Bexar County, actually. Um, so, the Federal Writers Project had conducted interviews on former enslaved people for, the purpose of research. Um, and Felix Haywood was 92 years old at the time of his interview in 1937. And so this is Felix Hayward. This is him in front of his home that was taken by the Federal Writers Project. And then this is also his testimony that is given here. So the testimony was taken in July 6th of 1937. So, yes, so he would be 92 years old at the time and also completely blind. But he was unfortunately born a slave in Hedwig, Bexar County, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And his enslaver was William Gudlow.
Mm-hmm.
And he discusses what's most striking about this document, I think, and what kind of proves that Mexico acted as the slave haven for, um, or the safe haven
Uh-huh.
for enslaved people, um, is that he actually gives testimony to, or he gives his, or from memory, he basically discusses how easy it is to kind of get into Mexico, especially within Texas. And this is very important, as many enslaved people would attempt to escape to Mexico, in hopes of being free and in hopes of escaping slavery. Because as we've seen so far, Mexico is kind of putting out all these policies, these national domestic policies that are saying that this is not okay in our country. And so, in taking note of that, I think it is important to understand why and freedom seekers were seeking freedom in Mexico. And Felix Haywood attests to that. So here it reads, um, oh, I'm pretty sure you can see that.
Let me see. Oh yeah, oh yeah, nice. Okay, excellent.
Yes. So he basically says sometimes someone would come along and try to get us to run up north and be free. So when he says up north, this refers to the Union at the time in the United States, those northern states. And then he says, we used to laugh at that. There wasn't no reason to run up north. All we had to do was walk, but walk south. And we'd be free as soon as we crossed the Rio Grande. In Mexico, you could be free. They didn't care what color you were, black, white, yellow, or blue. Hundreds of slaves did go to Mexico and got on all right. And we would hear about them and how they were going to be Mexicans. They brought up their children to speak only Mexican. And I think this testimony is great, because something that I had run along in within my research is that there, so when freedom seekers would seek freedom in Mexico, and they would run away from their enslavers would actually place newspaper ads, typically with some kind of reward if they were found. And the what was interesting is that the price and reward would increase the closer if they were captured. So the closer that they would be captured, closer to the border of Mexico, the more the the more whoever ended up catching them got rewarded in the end. Um, which I think also speaks to the general border dispute between the United States and Mexico. Um, but
Can I
yes,
ask you a question about this? Now, you
yes,
said Goodloe was the enslaver of Haywood, right?
yes.
Okay. Was that A.G. Goodloe, or you don't remember?
His name is William.
Oh, William Goodloe. Okay. Because
Yes.
um I'm gonna let you pull up this and share it with folks.
Okay.
This is, I think, a relative of his. I won't put it in the chat real quick. Um, because this one is a relative of Goodloe's, and you can see in this one, if you want to pull that up for people, that he's offering $200 reward for, and Goodloe did have a freedom seeker, or two. I think two people ran away.
See, I had found this one, but I was unsure if it could have been
Same
true.
guy. I'll,
Um,
I'll I'll double check that, but I think your audience is going to be interested in that. Do you want to just show them, kind of, to give them a feel for uh
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
just
So
click on it there and it should pull up.
oh, there we go. Um, okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, here it is.
I'll just start explaining the newspaper ads.
Yeah.
Okay. So as mentioned, when freedom seekers would run off to Mexico in hopes of um, being free from slavery, oftentimes their enslaver would publish newspaper ads. And it would look just like this. As we can see, there's a $200 reward here. And it would often give a description and where they were going at the time. So most of these often say, I have a speculation that they're running to Mexico,
Mhm.
because it was so widely known at the time that you could run to Mexico and attempt to be free if you do end up making it. Um, and here, I think what's also important is that, so here it reads, if taken in the actual county, which would have been Bexar County, um, uh, that the enslaver, which would have been Goodloe at the time, will give $25 each for the delivery and lodgment in jail. So then here, right after, it says if beyond its limits, towards the Nueces or the Rio Grande, $50 each, and if taken in Mexican territory, $100 each.
Which is illegal. For them to raid in and take
Right.
a free person would be illegal. So he's actually rewarding and expecting illegal slave catching. That's the very interesting thing there. And if you want to
Right.
share with him that last part.
Right. So essentially, so then here it reads they had some acquaintance with Mexicans at the San Jose Mission, also at Panamaria, and said before they left they would make friends with some of them to help them off to Mexico.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so the San Jose Mission often acted as a passing point
Yeah.
between the United States and Mexican territory, and that is often where enslaved people heading to Mexico would kind of stop by first um, on their way, and they would meet Mexican citizens there. Um, who would often kind of help them out in some way or another. But the thing about the San Jose mission is that it actually became widely known as a kind of a hot spot for freedom seekers when they would, um, try to seek solace in Mexico. It became such a widely known hotspot that slave catching, I believe it's expeditions.
Yeah.
Those a
Mhm.
part of those kind of companies would kind of stalk and like hang around the San Jose mission in hopes of finding one of these enslaved freedom seekers in the newspaper for the monetary award. Um,
And by the way, I just found out that A.G. Goodloe is the father of William. So he had sons William, Paul, and Calvin.
wow.
So yeah, so
Mm,
it's all in the same family here. So
mm,
excellent work. You've linked in another source, and you've made much stronger again
mm,
your case that Mexico is really a land of freedom, and that Mexican Americans, Tejanos here in San Antonio,
mm,
are being credited here, or actually condemned in this case, as
mm,
helping keep Black Texans free. So
mm.
excellent. All right, thanks. We'll stop interrupting and getting excited about that particular part and let you return to yours. So this is the father of William. Um,
Yes.
yeah, excellent.
William Goodloe. I also think it's important to mention that a lot of these newspaper ads didn't start popping up until the 1850s.
Mhm.
Um, so my given timeline was around 1821, 1836, and it is like during that particular time period. I have yet to find any particular newspaper ads from this time, but I did find a lot in the 1850s.
That's
So
because it's illegal. That's because
right.
yeah, slavery was illegal in Texas in your period. And so of course you can't publish, hey, my enslaved person ran away, because then the Mexican authorities will know that you're breaking the law. So it's only after Texas kicks Mexico out that they can start publishing these. So that's your explanation. Thank you for making that point.
So then,
Okay.
again, as we can see here, so he describes the escape to Mexico, in terms of like a simple walk.
Mhm.
I mean, he quite literally said you don't even have to run to reach Mexico. You can just walk into past the Rio Grande, and now you are a freed person. Um, and I think his
There, where
testimony,
you mentioned it, yeah, it's
yeah.
confirmed, yeah.
And as we just saw, the testimony can be cross confirmed with newspaper ads in the 1850s.
Mhm.
So I thought this was very critical to add in the argument that Mexico was pro abolitionist and that it came from a very humanitarian place um, instead of um, Mexico kind of looking to, yeah, kind of looking to take advantage of the situation here. And
Nice.
then so when we talk about the cost for Mexico, um, this contributes a lot of things actually, as this could be costly for a country in multiple kinds of ways. Um, so we do have our first point being the aggression from Anglo-Americans. As we just saw in the newspaper article, there is kind of this back and forth of, Mexico trying to find some legitimacy for its laws, especially to Anglo-Americans that are in Texas and as well as Tejanos. Um, Mexico's putting out these laws and Anglo-Americans are simply not following them, um, which can be detrimental to a starting up country who's trying to gain some kind of legitimacy in the world. And then so we kind of have those constant tensions, as well as the fear of losing control of the country. So as we mentioned, that a lot of Anglo-American families often bought land in Mexico. Um, and at some point, there were so many Anglo-Americans within, not just the country of Mexico, but also they had started to make their way into the government, specifically the government in Saltillo, that is basically of Coahuila in Texas. So when we address like that particular body of government, it will say the government of Coahuila and Texas or Texas. Um, and that's where, so that's a government that's up in the north, so right next to the United States at the time. So naturally, Anglo Americans started to slowly but surely make their way into government. And that's when Mexican authorities and the Mexican government kind of took a step back and said, this is not looking like we're going to have control much longer if we stay completely docile. So that was a big fear as well. Um, and then a lot of this political instability and aggression from and the tensions between both sides led to a lot of instability in the country, that slowed down the isolation or the industrialization period, that most countries were going through at the time. So I believe it is Mexico did not have its first textile. Oh my goodness, what is the word?
Factory or
Factory, yes.
yeah.
Thank you. They didn't have the first textile factory until I believe the mid 1840s, which is considered pretty late, given that the United States had already kind of started going through some form of industrialization at this point. And we all know that, Great Britain was almost completely industrialized as well. Um, so that's very intimidating to a country. And I attribute that this slowdown in industrialization and overall slowdown in production kind of left them out from globalization and global trade, which and then kind of solidified Mexico's place as this peripheral country in the global international system.
Nice. I like that. Nice. And then there's the Texas Revolution and this land
Yeah.
law. Those two pieces where they're losing land.
Yes,
You want
and
to talk us through that?
yes. So we've had the Texas Revolution and the Mexican American War, which results in a huge territory loss in both battles. And what's important to note here about these two battles and war is that the kind of reasoning for these things to happen was because of this tension that went on from um, Mexico's abolitionist sentiments.
Yeah.
You see in the Texas Revolution, we have, Anglo Americans kind of fighting and revving up the need for revolution because they feel as though Mexico has kind of not taken their desires into account, which is ultimately slavery. Um, so that is a huge reason as to why the Texas Revolution and the Mexican American War kind of happened, and which results in the 55% loss in territory, which we can see here, to give better perspective. So this is all of the territory that was lost in both. So the Texas Revolution, at first we lose Texas, which is still a big portion of the land.
Right.
Um, but then in the Mexican American War, which is again another border dispute, we end up losing California, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. that would then become the United
Part
States.
part of Kansas, Colorado, and Wyoming. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Excellent
Oh,
map.
yes. Here
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. That's a very compelling.
Yes. So I think
So that's a
that,
big cost. Big cost.
right, just for simply kind of fighting for someone's um, rights as a human being. So then that leads us to our overall findings. So, as we've seen through here, Abraham Lincoln was not the first pro abolitionist.
Mhm.
Um, as you know, Guerrero and Iturbide and many and the Mexican government for the past 16 years, roughly, have been trying to, go on
Maybe,
about
maybe 25, right?
maybe
They're
25.
promulgating this in 21,
Mhm.
and Lincoln promulgates the Emancipation Proclamation in 63. So 30 solid years, 30, 30,
So
32
yeah,
years. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not good
So
at
thank
math.
you. That's an excellent, point that
Yes.
who is the who's decreeing abolition. Well, Mexico deserves credit here. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
And then again, another finding that we did go through was Mexico was perceived as a safe haven for freedom seekers. We saw that, in Felix Hayward's testimony, as well as the newspaper ads
Mhm.
from the father, William Goodloe. So his father would have been A.G. Goodloe, um, and that's who we saw in the newspaper article, in the newspaper ad. Um, and then three, as we kind of went over towards the end, that Mexico's pro-abolitionist stance was costly for the country as a whole, and still and kind of affected the country for the rest of its history, essentially. Um,
And it's kind of a miracle Mexico survived even.
right. And then the fourth was the economic justification for slavery isn't sufficient. Um, and I actually forgot to mention this earlier in the presentation, but there were, along with Anglo-Americans coming to Mexico, um, a lot of Germans were actually coming as well. There is a man by the name of Ernest. Oh, I cannot remember his name for the life of me. His name is Ernest, but it's because he went by this alias. Um, but okay, we'll place his name somewhere. Um, so this German man named Ernest kind of comes to Mexico, and then he writes this famous letter to all of his friends and family back home about how great it is in Mexico and how there's a lot of opportunity um, that we don't really get in Germany, which is attributed to the influx of German immigrants in Mexico, actually. And but instead of looking for economic opportunities within slavery, um, they were teachers and they were professors and they were lawyers and they were bankers. Um, and so, as we can see, there's not just one um, economic endeavor that was possible in Mexico. Um, there was also, again, we mentioned the kind of first textile factory in the 1840s. Once the factory was in place, I think the textile industry in Mexico just completely boomed, especially in northern Mexico. And slavery was not used at that time because it was illegal. Um, so, you
And also,
know,
I remember you mentioning to me earlier in your research that
mm,
the whole area around Lagunilla, the whole area in northern Mexico, is also a cotton producing region with no problem producing cotton with free labor.
yes.
And your research, I remember, reminded me, your mentioning of the German immigrant to
Mhm.
Mexico reminds me of the German immigrants to Texas. They were coming in at the same time the Anglos were, and they were prospering on their farms without enslaved labor. So,
Prejudices.
so you're absolutely right. This economic oh, we need slavery in order to prosper, in order to progress, is definitely a weak position and
Mhm.
easily discredited. So I appreciate you remembering even that angle for your research.
Okay. And so now that I've presented this research to you, I think a cool idea or a cool area of where to pick up next and kind of where to continue looking is I have it here actually. Oh, I think it would be pretty cool if we could trace the impresario land grants
Mhm.
um, to enslavers that were originally living in the United States.
Wow, that would be good.
I think that would be super cool. There is a database. Um, there's a database with all the land grants. I just haven't figured out how to work it yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Excellent. I appreciate that suggestion because we are looking for crowdsourcing opportunities to have people in the community pick up on the research that the podcast students are presenting. So that sounds like a great idea. Just find out who's in the colony, get the names, find out where they came from, check and see if they were enslavers there, and
yeah,
try to trace their journey to see if they came with enslaved people or what happened there. That would be because you're right that otherwise, how are we going to do the count of
right.
the people who were brought? We know that Austin's colony, the colony that's often called the Old 300,
Yes.
had 25% of the people in that colony were enslaved.
Hmm.
So we know that from the very beginning, slavery was a huge part of Anglo-American colonization of Texas. So yeah, that definitely drove so much, and I'm glad you were willing to spend this semester tracking it down and helping everybody understand it, Alexis. Okay.
And I do have one more idea, which I think may be a little harder,
Mhm.
but I was really inspired by Los Mascogos,
Uh-huh.
which is a group that lives in Coahuila currently to this day. Um, and they are the descendants of enslaved people who fled the United States into Mexico.
Mhm.
And I think tracing lineage of that particular group could be super interesting as well.
Super interesting. Wow, that would be amazing. Yeah. And Mexico, as it happens, is just beginning in here in the 2020s
Mhm.
to make a serious commitment to reclaiming Black Mexico, Afro-Mexican peoples.
Mhm.
So your work is very timely in that regard. Wouldn't it be great if we found some funding? Got
Right.
back to you on that thing, and that'd be great. You're about to graduate, so maybe you could pick this up while you're waiting to go to law school.
Yes, that would be super cool.
Be super
And
cool.
then lastly, I just want to say thank you. I wanted to take the time to acknowledge and thank SACAM for not only giving myself but my classmates the opportunity to kind of show the capability of young minds and what we can do. And I also want to thank Dr. Van Hoy for kind of facilitating this research and always encouraging me to expand all my horizons and to not be scared to keep going when you run into bumps.
I'm proud of you. I'm really grateful to you too. And I'm basically in the process. I'm old and handing the baton to this new generation. So I'm entrusting everything to you. Very capable hands. Well, thank you so much, Alexis, and appreciate your work. And I'll let you know where this goes next. And if you have a QR code or anything, you can add it
Yes.
now. Otherwise, oh, there it is. Oh, good.
Yes.
uh, so that people can see the sources and so that you can contact Alexis and make your suggestions or volunteer your research skills and interests to take her project to the next level. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate our audience. And only teaming up can we bring this, can we tell these truths? And can we all kind of come together for the kind of world that these young people deserve? So thank you so much, everybody. And good night to everybody.
Yay.